We're going up and down, over and over. It's the same old thing. Up and down, over and under.
Dr. Winter, welcome to the show. We're really excited to have you on today.
Hey, I appreciate the invitation. It's very kind of you.
Absolutely. And we were just talking a little bit beforehand. Thoroughly enjoyed your book. And I was, as I was saying, some of this literature can be a little dense to get through, and it can be a little bit more of a reference guide. What I enjoyed about yours was, number one, I think your personality comes out pretty clearly. I had the audiobook, which I enjoyed listening to, but like a lot of people, I think I've really dove headfirst into trying to better understand sleep because I wasn't sleeping well.
Awesome. That's step one, isn't it?
That is step one, but it was nice to read a book on sleep that kind of, you know what I mean, looked at the lighter side of things when you had an opportunity to. So it made it fun learning about sleep, kind of helped, hopefully dissipate some of my own anxiety around sleeping poorly. But maybe we could start there. One thing that I took from your book was that it seems like there's a number of people, and I would love to know, your take on this. It sounds like people don't do a great job of understanding how well they're actually sleeping, whether that be sleeping well or sleeping poorly. Can we kind of talk a little bit about that phenomenon and why that exists?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's an interesting thing to think about sleep and the way we determine good or bad. And that's something I wrote in my new book about kids. I know you're the father of several children, that good student, bad student, good swimmer, bad swimmer, I don't know, good person, bad person. We all have metrics for the way we determine these types of things. And I think that we don't do a good job of defining good metrics sometimes for sleep. So if your metric is speed with which you fall asleep, that, speed may be a great metric for a swimmer. How fast can you get from this side of the pool to that? Speed. Techniques in there, and whether you are a good sport or a bad sport, all those things are fantastic. But bottom line, speed is probably a good metric. I think speed's a terrible metric for sleep, how fast we fall asleep. And for a lot of people, that's the metric. And maybe we teach that as parents. Okay, get to sleep fast. If you don't get to sleep fast, Dad'll look in on you. And if he catches you with a comic book and a flashlight, you're in big trouble. And if you don't get to sleep fast, you're going to fail your spelling test and not make the basketball team. I don't know what but people tell their kids. So
that's basically, I try to talk to my kids as little as possible.
Me too. That's right. Try to talk to my kids a little possible and touch patients as little as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, so I think these things are really important in the sense that if we don't define what healthy, good, positive X is, then we can get off on really bad tangents. And so, I really appreciate what you said about my book. I think that there are a couple populations of people out there searching for sleep answers. One might be a group of individuals who are struggling to sleep, maybe like yourself, and maybe my book would help with that. Maybe my book would irritate somebody. I don't know. I think there's also a group of people, I always call them, my name for it is Jenny Trauma Surgeon. I have no idea where that came from. But Jenny Trauma Surgeon thinks as long as she gets 30 minutes of sleep when she's on a call, she's capable of taking your spleen out tomorrow, having not slept in 36 hours. So I'm not sure my book would be the best book for Jenny Trauma Surgeon. That might be a book like Matt Walker's book, or even Ariana Huffington's, where you don't believe in sleep. This is all ridiculous. Just get a few hours, have a cup of coffee or 7, and you're going to be fine. No, you're not, actually. So there is a spectrum of, I don't give a shit about sleep versus I care so much about sleep, it almost paralyzes me. Right. I think that my book might speak to that second group in a way. Like you said, the whole point of it was, let's sit down and have a latte or a beer together, whatever your drink of choice is. Neither before bed, perhaps, but we're going to sit down and have this nice beverage and on a pleasant day, and we're just going to talk like buddies, not like the professor with the bow tie and whatnot. So I do hope that there is a communication that happens between me and the reader, or me and the listener in your case, that is positive and maybe even if it doesn't answer all questions, get some seeds planted for sure.
Well, and you know, one of the things that I walked away from that feeling was need to be really clear about whether or not you actually have, like, let's say, like a sleep disorder, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I took from your book was a lot of these issues that folks have with sleep could be tied back to, in some respects, anxiety around sleep.
And that's
so
real. Just to be, I think sometimes that gets sort of put out there as you don't have a problem. It's just all in your head. No, it's a big problem. It's just maybe a bit of a different problem than what you think it is. And that's a delicate little subject to get around. You know, as a neurologist, we were always tasked in the ER with determining people who truly couldn't see versus people who were faking blindness or truly couldn't move their left arm or faking weakness. And we have all kinds of little tricks to figure that out. Once we figured out that you can see just fine, but you're pretending not to be able to see, it doesn't mean you don't have a problem. Right. It just means maybe the problem is a little bit different from what you think it is or what you're telling people, but it's still a problem that we need to work together without judgment and fix. Nobody is like, I'm bored. I'm going to pretend like I can't see and go to the ER. Like, there's something going on in all those cases. We just need to figure out what that origin is. And sleep's no different.
Yeah. Well, and you know, one of the things that I enjoyed as well is like you likened it to other just like necessary what's the word? I mean, like foundational, like hierarchy of needs, like foundational needs. Like sleep is no different than your need to eat, your need to have water. Like, you know, it's proven you need sleep to live. So it's again, to your earlier point, like maybe it's not about like, am I good or bad at it? It's like,
it might be your interpretation of it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And no, the idea that there are people out there who can't or don't sleep is not real. And if you put individuals into, you know, the David Blaine situation of he's going to sit himself in an acrylic clear box in Times Square and not sleep for 2 weeks, there's going to be massive debilitation and pride. Nobody's going to walk by David Blaine and I love David Blaine. I mean, he's got the greatest ideas of stuff. In fact, I remember a long time ago having communications with his people about him wanting to break the sleep deprivation record. And
you're kidding me.
And I was kind of like, man, I can't help you. This is like, I want to break the oxygen record of holding my breath. Like, no, I'm really not want to be a part of that. But, you know, so
it kind of goes against my core mission.
I swore an oath at some point in my career. It's like walking by this guy, you know, on day 3, nobody's going to look at him in this box and think there's nothing going on with him. I mean, he's going to look like he is struggling to stay awake. I mean, my record for sleep deprivation was 48 hours just because at some point in college, I realized, wow, I've been up for like 32 hours. I'm almost at 2 days. And so I did it. And I think at the end of it, I was like hallucinating my mother's voice telling me to clean my room. It was so terrifying. I was like, I need to go to bed now.
You know what? I have this really distinct memory. So we had this thing where, you know, undergrads could work reunions. And I went to Princeton. Reunions is massive. People might not believe it, but it's like, I think the second biggest Budweiser order behind the Indianapolis 500. Like, it's nuts. Like 25,000 people come back. It's crazy.
Princeton reunions.
Yeah, I mean, it is like you might have suffered through 4 years if you didn't enjoy it, but you stuck it out so that you could come back to reunions once every 5 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
But like, so, you know, you would get on a reunions crew and over like the course of the 3-4 days, you just be at the bar. You're at the bar, you're moving kegs, like you're helping people get to the, like anything, you know, an alumni needs, you're there to serve. But it's an all-night party. So you're up till, I don't know, 3-4 in the morning, and then you got to start working again at like, you know, I don't know, 6.
Yeah, the football game the next morning, the tailgate.
Well, and then of course, so what it really means is there's a bunch of football meatheads who got assigned to work like, you know, the 5th reunion. So when they're off the clock, they're not like, well, hey, let me go get rested up. They're like, well, where can I go drink? So to your point, so I think I did like a 48-hour bender one time, kind of unintentionally. Yep. And I have this distinct memory of my, like the cartilage in my knees, just like hurting, just like all my joints, just like walking around. And I was like, oh man, like something is really off. Like, and I was in the best shape of my life, but I just like it's debilitating.
It is. It is.
So I don't know how David Blaine is doing anything.
It's an awful feeling. And, the world record for deprivation is 11 days. It's a guy named Randy Gardner at Stanford. And when you talk to Bill DeMint, the guy who ran the study, is like, yeah, it's kind of a sham. He said Randy Gardner did not go 11 days without sleep. Like, we couldn't stop him from sleeping. He would, fall asleep playing a pinball machine or something. So sleep deprivation is a lot harder than the 42-year-old woman in Lululemon leggings who looks fantastic, 10 years younger than her age, who says I haven't slept in 6 months. No, sister, that's not the problem we're dealing with in the clinic today. So let's sit and talk a little bit.
So what is that? Because like I'll give you an example. So I'm not. People might be surprised by this. I'm actually not one to like track my biometric health. Like I'm becoming much more interested in it, but I've almost didn't want to go down that road because I didn't know how I would respond to getting that much data.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I did recently is I got an 8 sleep, and I got it because and I like the chili pad's awesome too. And I run very hot. Yep. I bought it because I wanted my bed cooled. That's been fantastic. But it came with all this tracking information that not what I signed up for, but it was interesting.
Sure.
And I had an experience this morning where I was like, wow, I don't know if I slept great, but I woke up and, maybe it was the opposite. I'm trying to remember. It was like my sleep score was great, but I don't feel great. And like, look, that could be a little bit about the tracking technology, but I've even kind of experienced that internal conflict of like, hey, something external says I had a good night's sleep, but I don't know if I necessarily believe it or feel it. So what kind of is going on there for folks? Because it sounds like this is something that people suffer with on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's funny. At the end of my new book, I'm a huge fan of Sam Shem. He wrote this book called The House of God. It was the book that St. Elsewhere was based on. And when you're a young doctor, everybody talks about the rules of the House of God, which is sort of an appendix in the back of the book, all these little, like, you can't find a fever if you don't take a temperature kind of thing, implying that you can discharge somebody faster if you never take their temperature because you'll never find, it's satirical, but there's some truth to these types of things. Yeah. And so I was a huge fan of that book growing up. And so I put the rules of, the House of Sleep or something at the end of my new book. Just had to fight with my editor to get it in there because it doesn't make any sense. Like, well, it makes sense to me and I want them in there. But one of the rules of the House of Sleep are, and we say these in the clinic all the time, I mean, goofy stuff like you can't fall asleep hanging sheetrock. That's one of them, meaning, carpenters can have the worst sleep dysfunctions, but they're busy in their job. So it's kind of hard to fall asleep hanging sheetrock. So you don't fall asleep until you get home. And everybody's like, well, he's a carpenter hanging sheetrock. Of course he's going to be sleepy. But so you kind of hide your problem there versus if that guy stopped putting sheetrock up and became an accountant, everybody be like, what's wrong with you? You fall asleep all the time in your office, right? Because he's not busy. But one of them is the secret rules of the laws of the House of God is sleep perception and sleep reality are two very different things. And I think what you're getting at is exactly that. This idea that I had a terrible night last night. We slept in this terrible hotel. It was a lot of traffic noise. I was lucky if I got 30 minutes of sleep last night. It might be very different from what your little sleep tracker on your wrist says. Oh, you got 6 hours, or vice versa. You think you slept great and you barely slept at all. And you see little glimpses of this. If your partner, you're sitting there watching, Selling Sunset or whatever your show is you're watching right now, and your partner falls asleep and then wakes up a little bit and like, what's going on? And I can understand why Christine is so mad at Sherelle or whatever. And like, well, sweetheart, you've been asleep for the last 30 minutes. No, I've not. Well, yeah. Like you were out cold, and my wife will fall asleep like holding a phone, like in mid whatever she was getting ready to touch. I like walk by, like, what were you getting ready to touch on your phone? Like it's like the Frozen, like you looked at the Hydra or something. But anyway, right. Or Medusa. I mean, so anyway, but those perceptions are fascinating to me, and one of the things that we know exacerbates that is anxiety. So that really becomes a circular engine of I'm nervous about my sleep and my tracker says this, and oh my God, I'm really not sleeping, which makes my perception of what's going on even worse. And so it can get to sort of a full-on panic for some people who want to do the right thing for their body. And that's really one of the reasons why the book, 'hopefully has a disarming feel to it. You know, I always tell people the last thing that person should read is Matt's book. Because if you're scared you can't sleep and you read all the terrible things that happen when you don't sleep in Matt's book, it's not going to help you.
Right.
It's kind of situation. Sorry, again, Matt's book is the Bible. But yeah, it's one of those things where you need the Bible, but you might need a few little Sunday school classes first before you tackle, Leviticus. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Leviticus sounds heavier than something like
it does sound heavier.
Paul. Anyway.
Well, and that is one of the feelings that I had walking away from that book. It's like, all right, I need to, you need to chill out a little bit. Well, and a lot of folks who are listening to this, so to go back to those of us who are parents and those of us who are probably starting to commute again, a lot of people can relate to I just woke up, it's 2 a.m. I've got 3 hours before I need to be up. It's like, that is like the sort of anxiety that someone like me, personally, that's what I have with sleep. It's that midnight wake up. Oh, there's only so much time left. Like you start to get in a little bit of a panic, and then before you know it, like you can't fall back asleep. And so I was really interested to hear in your book, like all the ways and kind of like some of the tactics that you can kind of try and disarm yourself. And let me ask you, is that sort of anxiety, is that something that you find to be really common?
Yes.
In the patients that you see?
Oh, absolutely. And the great thing is that when you do this as long as I have, there is a kind of person that comes to our clinic. They are successful, they're interesting, they're multifaceted, they got their fingers in all kinds of stuff. They were the captain of this and the president of that. There is something about that insomnia phenotype that is positive. I mean, you're the kind of person that when you determine that there is a bug in the software that you're developing, you fix it. When there's discrepancies in the numbers of the accounting that you do, you address it. So that type A, detail-oriented, great leader, big thinker, lots of stuff going on between the ears, works really well in people's lives in terms of, I think, success and climbing ladders and helping people be happy. I think when that individual walks into their bedroom and turns a light off and lies down on a pillow, getting outside of that personality type and more into the guy who's really into just like hanging out and eating some Cheetos and playing some World Cup, like I don't really work. I think working is not a great thing for me. It was never really my thing, right. Like that, to be able to flip the switch from personality one to that guy is really hard.
It's hard to shut that off.
It's hard to shut it off. And so, and I don't really want you to shut it off. I just want you to sort of work with it instead of against it, because the people we see in our clinic kind of make the world go round, and so it's just sometimes that can be kind of a heavy weight to bear when you go to bed, when you don't really understand sleep and your metric is I've got to sleep quickly so that I can be the best, all those things that we just talked about the next day.
Yeah. So for that type of individual, I mean, where do you start?
Well, I think you start with, rule number one is that there's no such thing as not being able to sleep. So you've got a problem, but let's make sure we've defined the problem properly. And the problem is not, you've come to me so that I can figure out why you can't sleep and make it so. It's sort of, I always call that the Michael Jackson pathway of, sleep success, which is Michael Jackson, king of pop, I assume went to a doctor at some point and said, getting ready to go out on the road again, rehab my image, which needs a little help. I'm doing some new dance numbers, trying to remember them, big pyrotechnics. I mean, I don't know, I've never seen a Michael Jackson concert in my life.
All the Michael Jackson
big Thriller fan. I love the picture on the back with the little baby tiger. I always thought that was an interesting touch. But so to me, so the doctor, and so he said, I'm not being able to sleep. So at that point, a doctor could have said, I'm sorry, you're struggling, Michael. You're sleeping. We just got to get it so that you're feeling it better. It's more consistent. It makes you feel better or whatever it is. But that was never done. It was kind of like, well, here, take these pills. And
Right.
they didn't work. And he came back, well, these pills you're giving me are great, but King of Pop needs something a little bit more. Great. We got these thriller pillars back here. We'll give you these pills and see what happens. They don't work. So eventually a surgeon's coming to his house to anesthetize him every night. Dear God, like that was quite a leap.
Is that what was going on?
Yeah. So it was a surgeon came to his house giving him propofol. We call that milk of amnesia. It's what they give you when you get your colonoscopy and you're sitting there talking to your doc. Hey, doc, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing you know, you're waking up like, okay, Chris, it's all done. Your colonoscopy is fine. And, and it was like just instant. It's like somebody spliced out a section of your life and just taped them together.
Right.
Which was shocking to me because apparently during not to talk to your listeners about colonoscopies, but during mine, it was kind of like that same sort of situation. I woke up and the guy was like, "You're all fine, Chris." And then my wife said, "God, you were out of control." I mean, what are you talking about? He said, when you came out, like you were walking around with a blanket around your neck, telling everybody, winter is coming, and you were acting like some character out of Game of Thrones, and you thought it was hilarious. Like I was doing that. They said, yes, we were having trouble actually getting you to get back into the bed. That's terrifying. I mean, that's like right out of college. That's right back. That's the Princeton days right there, right?
Oh man, I got some sleepwalking stories I could tell you.
So anyway, the step one is define the problem. You can sleep.
Yeah.
It'd be impossible for you not to. So let's figure out why it is that you're having so much difficulty initiating it, or maybe so much difficulty even perceiving it, because your wife's saying you sleep pretty well. Your watch is saying your 8-sleep bed is saying you're sleeping pretty well, but you're not feeling it. Why? And that's probably a really good place to start, because I need to get you outside of the box as quickly as possible of I'm not sleeping. And that can be hard. That can be very, very hard for some people, because that feeling of not being able to sleep has been there so long. It's almost become a part of who you are. It's kind of like, I believe that every child, every adult has to have their thing. He's a great athlete. That woman's a great trauma surgeon. He's a good cook. This guy's a great, joke teller, whatever it is. And for some people, their thing becomes they're the worst sleepers that you would ever know. And when you start questioning,
I know that person.
You sleep pretty well, actually. Your sleep's all right. Like that's fundamentally, it's like, you're not as Christian as you think you are. Well, yes, I am. Like that's like questioning religion or questioning paternity. Like it really digs deep in some people. So you got to be careful with that sometimes. And if you want to see evidence of this, if you look up my first book on Amazon and look at the reviews, you can sort them out based upon the stars. So you do the 1-star. I just want to see the 1-star reviews of Chris's book. And as you read them, I actually did an academic lecture on insomnia at a place based upon the 1-star reviews of that first book. And you can see just the anger, the terror, the frustration, the hopelessness and that's what you gotta start making cracks in that shield pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah.
That's step one.
Step one. Yeah. Because it's funny. And I imagine there's a lot of folks out there like myself, well-intentioned,
sure,
trying to do all the right things.
Yeah.
And I can see how it's very easy to veer down a path where it's like, you're making it a win-loss. Like, it's like, oh God, I didn't do all the right things. Or it's like, oh shit, I woke up at 2, like, here we go. It's, it's all ruined. And that anxiety can get kicked up in so many different ways. So to your point, it's like, not the
and the anxiety is a necessary component, because if I talk to somebody at a dinner party, hey, I'm a sleep doctor, how long does it take you to fall asleep? Somebody says that takes me, 2 hours. My first question, how do you feel about that? If somebody says, well, I don't care, I love it. So I work with a lot of professional sports teams, and I find raising children and dealing with sleep, there's always a great sports analogy. And to me, the sports analogy, and I wrote about in the first book, is this guy, Steve Blass, the guy who's sort of the first sort of major sports person to really characterize the yips. Suddenly the baseball player who, since he was, knee high to a grasshopper, could throw a ball to first base or throw the ball to the catcher, suddenly can't. Steve Sachs, when I was growing up, I was a big Dodger fan. Steve Sachs was their shortstop, and all of a sudden, the guy could not make the throw from shortstop to first base. I mean, comically bad. And to your point, it's like you said, the worst thing for that person to do is try harder.
Right.
And I think that was the Orioles manager, like Cal Ripken Sr., said to somebody who was struggling with that, try easier. You got to step back from it. And I think that when you really push down on sleep and try harder, Chris, I'm trying to sleep. I go to bed and I try to do everything. All right, try. Like, you got to stop that. It's kind of like, if I invite you over for dinner, I'm going to try to get hungry. I'm going to try real hard to get hungry. No, you're not.
Yeah.
You'll live your life. And if you come over and you don't want to eat the fish I've cooked, slaved over for the last 3 hours, you don't want to eat my fish, you go right ahead, don't eat that fish. But I'll hold it against you. But, I work so hard on that stuff. So anyway.
I love it. Well, and maybe that's an interesting avenue to go down. Like, can we talk a little bit how you are working with some of these professional sports teams and athletes today? Is it the same approach that you would take to an executive who walks into your office, or are you working to put together plans, helping like outfit their sleep environment? Like, what does that sort of collaboration look like?
I think it looks exactly like the collaboration with a patient. In fact, that's one of the things we often tell the teams, that technology is great, and devices you wear or sleep on or put around your head or on your underwear waistband, they're awesome. They figure out how fast you run and how many steps you've taken that day, or calories you burned, or the ketones in your urine. Like, it's all awesome.
Right.
But what it really boils down to at the end is that guy or that gal is just a patient. And so for one of the things we're trying to make sure that the team is not doing is investing a ton of money in tech, but not in sort of a clinical relationship with this thing. It's like I don't know, buying a massive 7 Tesla MRI, but you've got no radiologist to read it. So you're making these beautiful pictures of spleens and pancreases and brains, but nobody knows what they mean. And so I think that the first thing we're trying to do within a team is just kind of create a culture where we're talking about sleep all the time. And we're doing it in a way that's supportive. We're not judging people. We're trying to be problem solvers about things, and not that sort of old school mentality of just take some more greenies and drink some more caffeine, you'll be fine. Like, nobody wants to hear you complain about your sleep. And so I really think that athletes today think a lot about their sleep. They think about these variables they can control, their nutrition, the way they train their bodies, their mindfulness. And so to me, sleep's that fourth pillar of those things that the athlete has a lot of control over, and the team has a lot of control over. So the first step is really just kind of creating within that organization, or feeling out, do you all really care about sleep in your athletes, or is this just a box you're checking? And then once you do, it just becomes like a collection of a lot of patients. A lot of them are sleeping just fine, don't have a problem. So we're trying to take those players and sort of fortify their sleep against the problem that's coming in 6 months. I mean, I always look at everybody in this world as people who have sleep problems, or people who are about to have them. So it's good though. But to me,
that should be comforting though. Like, there's an opportunity to say, like, you know what? It's not just me. It's a human thing to have some bad nights of sleep.
Absolutely, you bet it is. It's sort of, you can look at every city in this country as a city with good water supply or a threatened water supply. So instead of waiting for the city with threatened water supply to be out of water and be like, okay, now what do we do? Let's start working on it now. Let's get some things in place that when there is a catastrophe or a drought, that we've kind of made. We've sort of ensured that a little bit. And that's why I like working with athletes who are sleeping well, because, what's your plan for if you have a couple nights here coming up where things don't go well? There's some people who are like, oh yeah, that happens. I just will read a book. I don't really care. But other people are on the verge of a real problem. Playoffs come around and something bad happens. We want to make sure that they're educated and ready for it, because the readiness is really a big part of alleviating that anxiety. If something, it's like you hit the curveball. Like, he's got to throw a curveball. Hey, Astros. The Astros know it's coming because they're cheating and picking up signs from everybody. Like those wires up in their jerseys and so like, well, shit, hitting a curveball is a piece of cake when you're like, a curveball's coming. Okay, well, great. It's coming. Like, so I want people to be that same way with, hey, this curveball in your sleep's coming. Oh, no problem. I know exactly what to do in that situation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you know, you said this a couple times, a couple different ways in the book. It's more about like your interpretation of you
You
know,
bet.
whatever like sleep difficulty that you're having. Like it's gonna, and now these are my words, like it's gonna be as big of a deal as you make it. And I can kind of
Right.
relate to that. Like I said, you know, my big issue is not falling asleep. It's that waking up in the middle of the night, alarm's gonna go off in 3-4 hours. You know, and when that was like happening consistently, like I said, I've had 3 kids, so there's very few years of good sleep here. But now that they're sleeping, I'm kind of like, oh man, maybe some of this is on me, and it's not on like these little rugrats who are waking up every hour and a half. But initially, it was like, oh man, a lot of stress and anxiety when that would happen, and it would take me hours. But lately, and now look, I've talked to a number of sleep doctors by way of this podcast, so I'm
Yeah.
changing my approach a little bit. I've been able to kind of what you're saying in that last example. It doesn't bother me so much. Like, oh, you know, I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to watch a little Family Guy because that's something I like to do. And I find that I'm like falling asleep
Yeah.
25 minutes later on the couch. I'm like, oh God, I need to go back to bed. And I
Because you've
think
stopped trying. You know what I
yes,
mean? You're
that's
trying to
the
watch
only
Family Guy
thing.
and figure out what is the outcome of this plot. Like I'm trying that. That's what I'm trying to do now.
Right.
Versus as soon as I get into the bed, do you have the mindset of it's to me the example I always give is you're waiting for your kid to finish something up and you're standing around, there's a gymnasium there and there's a ball and you start shooting free throws just for fun. It's an empty gym. You're waiting, you got 20 minutes to kill right before so you make 8 out of 10 free throws. Like, wow, we're pretty good. But that's a very different situation for some people when the game's on the line. Like I think about Kyle
Mm,
Guy making the 3 free throws in the national championship that won UVA, my alma mater, the basketball championship. I think, wow, that guy just nailed 3 critical free throws to win a game.
the high
Yeah,
stakes.
I mean, now it's the
Yeah.
same as me shooting the 8 out of 10 in the little empty gym waiting around for my kid. But I can guarantee you, you know, as much as I've got sleep down to a science, I would never have made that. I would have not even hit the rim. But it's still, it's
Mm,
rubber ball and iron hoop. But how much psychological overlay do you put on it? You know, it's you fall asleep watching Family Guy, but you walk 20 feet and get into a bed, but can't fall asleep in that situation. Why? I always
mm.
ask people who take sleeping pills, I'm like, do you nap? Oh, yeah, I fall asleep all the time watching TV. What pill? I always ask, what sleeping pill do you take for the Family Guy when you fall asleep? They're like, oh, I don't take a sleeping pill when I watch Family. Oh, so you don't take a sleeping pill when you watch Family Guy to fall asleep, but when you go to bed, you got to take. Why? Like, what's the difference?
Right.
And you're like, I don't know. Well, of course, you know, it's because it's a pressure you're putting yourself under. You
Yeah.
know, and that's something we have to address. You know, I always tell people I want my patients to at least be neutral about the situation.
Hmm.
I actually love being in bed awake. Like I've always found, even when I was little, thought it was like it's like a little clubhouse that I'm allowed. You know, we used to go out in woods and we'd build like forts that are rickety and dangerous with rusty nails sticking out. Then you
Right.
build the fort and then you sit in it. Like the building of it was the big thing. Once you got the thing done, you're sitting in there and you're like, okay, what now do we do? I guess you know look at a comic book or something. I have no
Right.
idea.
Right.
Like that
Right.
was the whole point. Then you lose interest in it. But I always love that little feeling of just being a little clubhouse at night. You can think about whatever you want to think about, and nobody's bothering you, taking your money or emailing you car insurance warranty bullshit. Like so I just love it. So when you're running towards waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and be awake versus running away from it, it really changes things quite dramatically.
Hmm. And so, you know, beyond just some random podcaster telling people like, "Hey, just chill out, you'll sleep better." Like, what sort of approaches do you take with your patients to kind of like help them get over maybe some of that anxiety? Like you
Yeah.
talked a little bit about like helping the athlete prepare for the playoffs that are coming up. Hey,
Yeah.
nerves are going to be high. Like, be aware that there's a good chance, like you're going to have a tough time falling asleep. For someone in everyday life, a high performer in their own right, like what
Yeah.
sort of things like are at their disposal?
Well, I think one thing that really changes and affects sleep is we talk a lot about 8 hours. You sleep on a bed called 8 sleep, and there's where the 8 came from. Got to get your 8 hours. And that's fantastic as a population, an adult population norm. But how much sleep does, Emmett James from Alexandria, Virginia need?
Hmm.
57-year-old, economics teacher at a high school. So a lot of times insomnia comes from, and when you think about insomnia and sleep deprivation, they're really different. Insomnia is often an individual who needs this much sleep, 7 hours, but seeking 9. Because he
Hmm.
read in a Men's Health magazine one time that if you got 9 hours sleep, it boosts your testosterone, gives you more of a chance to get a six pack. So he's all in. 9 hours is for me.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean he can sleep 9 hours. He's not genetically programmed for it. I could buy 2 pizzas for lunch tomorrow that are extra large and loaded with pizza. Just because I bought the pizza doesn't mean I can eat it. So I
Right.
can have the expectation. I'm doing it. 2 pizzas for lunch today. Now, here we go. More meat, thicker crust. Let's do this thing. And you get halfway through your first, like, oh my God, I'm gonna throw up. So it's fine to have that expectation. So the flip side is sleep deprivation. That's the person who needs 9 hours and gives himself 7 every day. Usually has no problem sleeping, but is having a little bit of trouble staying awake at work, or maybe, nodding off at stoplights.
Hmm.
So it's very important in both of those situations that I need to make sure that the amount of sleep that you're seeking is in fact the amount of sleep that you need. It's like calories. If you're consuming 5,800 calories a day and you only need about 2,700, you will gain weight. If you need 5,800 because you're Michael Phelps, an Olympic swimmer, and you're consuming about 2,000 a day, that's not going to work out very well either, in a very different way. So it's all about managing the expectation and sometimes just blessing somebody and saying, you know what? It's okay, instead of going to bed at 9 o'clock with your alarm clock set for 6, it's
Yeah.
not, go to bed at 10 o'clock or maybe even 10:30. Like,
Mhm.
and it's amazing. I mean, people come in and say, it takes me 2 hours to fall asleep every night. Why do you go to bed at 9 o'clock? I don't know. Like, that's when I've always gone to bed. Like, that's what my grandmother told me, that if I didn't go to bed at 9 o'clock, terrible things would happen. It's weird where people get their information. It's kind of like I go to lunch every day at 10, but I don't order until noon. I had to sit there in the booth
Right.
and irritate waitresses. Like, no, you go to you go to the restaurant when you're hungry. Like, and if you're not hungry, my guess is you wouldn't even go. What'd you order at the restaurant today? I really wasn't that hungry, so I just skipped it. Oh my God,
Right.
we've got to get you to a hospital right away because you are beginning the process of starving to death. Said nobody ever. Like, so we have this inherent belief in our body that we could skip a lunch, dear God, skip our lunch and be just fine. In fact, you wouldn't even bring that up at dinner. Oh, guess what happened last week? What? I skipped lunch. It was the fucking weirdest thing in the world. What do you mean? I don't know. It was like lunchtime came around and Pete and Carol went out to the restaurant. I was like, I'm not hungry. And I stayed back and nothing happened. It was
Right.
crazy. Like, it wouldn't even be a conversation piece.
Right.
It would be like, that is the norm. The conversation piece would be, I met this guy and he's never skipped a meal in 58 years of living on this earth. And he's
Right.
really, really proud about it. Like, and he talked a lot, like, that's weird. Like, so we have this belief that we have a average thing that's happened during the day, but the little weird exceptions are okay when it comes to missing a meal or maybe not getting the hydration you need during the day or skipping a workout at the gym. My God, you
Right.
go to bed at 11 o'clock and you're still awake at 11:30. Woo! That is not a good thing for some people.
Whole week is shot, really. Well,
That's
so
right.
so for some, for
Yeah,
most
it's
people,
true.
the average person, how do you know when you're getting enough sleep? Like, what sorts
Good
of
question.
things can you
Yeah.
pay attention to? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, are you still awake out there?
Oh, there you go.
So there's one. Like, I mean, to me, there's something called an Epworth sleeping scale. I put it in my first book. It's in my second book, the kid version. You can look it up. You don't need to buy my book to see it. EPWRTH, and that's the thing that a lot of sleep doctors use to try to get a more objective sense of somebody's sleepiness. If you were lying down to rest in the afternoon, how likely would it be for you to fall asleep? No chance, slight chance, 50-50 definite. If you were the passenger in a car for an hour without a break, how likely would it be for you to fall asleep? No chance, slight chance, 50-50 definite. So it's eight scenarios, and you answer somewhere between no chance to forget it, I'm definitely falling asleep. So if somebody scores high on that,
Right.
they're saying there's big likelihoods that they would fall asleep in a lot of these situations. That always indicates that your sleep quantity or quality is deficient.
Hmm.
So if somebody says, oh my God, I really can't read. I have patients who say I can't read because if I sit and read, I'll fall asleep. I had a young woman who built a desk on a treadmill because she couldn't do her homework without falling asleep. She was an engineering student somewhere. And so she realized, if I just put a piece of wood on a treadmill, I can walk like 3-4 miles an hour and do my work and never fall asleep. I had a professor who said, I can't grade my students' papers without walking around my office. So I'm just taking all the chairs in my office. I just walk around and do my work. So those kinds of things would be a great indication that maybe you're not getting enough sleep. I had a truck driver rolled his hair up into his window. So if he fell asleep, it jerked his hair and it kept him awake. So why are you doing that? Well, because sometimes I nod off when I drive. Okay, why are you nodding off when you drive a big rig? It's probably because you're not getting enough sleep, or you're getting enough sleep. There's something wrong with it. So those things are important because that, to me, is a big problem. And it's interesting because the woman who built the desk on the treadmill is kind of this look like, doesn't everybody build desks on treadmills? No, they don't.
Right.
That is not a thing, sweetheart. So the thing of it is, they look at the discussion that we have in this culture about sleep, which is can't sleep, can't fall asleep, sleeping pills, melatonin gummy bears on a stick, whatever. And they're thinking, oh, that doesn't apply to me. I'm great at sleeping. I can sleep anywhere. I fell asleep one time during a, Maroon 5 concert, and so they're looking at that as sleep expertise, like graduate level sleep, versus no, that's really problematic sleep. And so the people who really probably need help are getting reinforced by the universe that they're awesome. Like, man, I can lay down on gravel and fall asleep. I'm so good at sleep. Versus, no, you need the help, and your partner who's frustrated that she can't fall asleep in 2.2 seconds like you can has the problem. No, she's probably more normal than you are. But then again, there's that metric of speed of sleep. It's kind of like saying, oh man, that dude, he's super nutritious, great eater. You got this great nutrition plan. Oh, really? How do you know? I've seen him eat dinner. He ate his entire dinner one time in 3 minutes. I saw it with my own eyes. I can't. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat my whole dinner in 3 minutes because I could be really healthy like that guy. There's nothing about eating your dinner in 3 minutes makes you healthy. There's nothing about falling asleep in 2 seconds before your head hits the pillow that makes you a great sleeper. Probably means you've got sleep problems because you're so driven. It's like, man, that guy's eating food out of a trash can. He's doing well. No, he's not. He's starving to death and he's not getting enough food. So he is making the determination that the food out of the trash can is a better choice than what I've got going on here, which is starving. So I'm going to do it. So there's nothing good about that. That guy needs help. He needs somebody to help him get some food that is good and nutritious because he's desperate. And that's what a desperate sleeper looks like.
Yeah. You know what I struggle with a little bit too? So on the one hand, it's what's a good example? I mean, it's like meditation in some ways, it's like, oh, you want to be great at it. It's like, yeah, so sit there and like do less, do nothing to be better. And the thing I think that, that I've kind of been thinking about more often is like, man, like, the more we understand about the negative implications that come along with sleep deprivation are very concerning. And so I think in addition to just like, hey, I want to show up, I want to be an awesome dad, I want to crush it at work, I want to do this podcast, have great energy when I do all that. It's like, man, there's some people in my family who either had dementia or Alzheimer's, and God, now they're telling me that if I'm not getting quality sleep or enough sleep, like increases my. So it's this weird kind of like dichotomy where it's like, hey, you need to just chill out and let it happen, and now I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but also it's like, hey, but this might be the most important thing that you could do for your emotional and physical well-being. So it's
absolutely. And that's important, but it does bear reminding that when you've encountered sleep deprivation, it doesn't look like a person who can't sleep. It's sort of like water deprivation. I'm lost in the woods. I'm trying to extract little bits of water out of ferns or whatever I saw on a Bear Grylls show one time. And then 7 days later, I am rescued. You got that, in the movies, they're all like chapped lips and kind of like white looking, and the rescue, oh my God, we found Dr. Winter. An idiot got lost in the woods trying to, sleep out in the woods. Here's a water bottle. No, thanks. No, thanks, fellas. I'm good. I thought I wanted the water bottle, but now that you're giving it to me, I really, really don't. That's not how water deprivation works. That's what. So when people are fearful of sleep deprivation, which you should be, you're working 2 jobs and you decide, you know what I'm going to do between my 2 jobs instead of sleep? I'm going to drive an Uber. I'll make even more money. Listen, you can do that, but you've got to set aside the time to sleep. Because if you don't, you will put yourself into a place where you're sleep deprived. We were sleep deprived in residency. We were on call every other night. That's illegal now. Man,
that's the thing that's astounding.
I was making all kinds of bad decisions and felt terrible. And my kids come across pictures of me from that point in my life like, Dad, oh my God, Dad, you look terrible. Like, and I do. I look awful, like ill and kind of despondent and
well, the irony that it's like the medical profession.
Oh God,
is the one asking people to do this like incredibly unhealthy. You like you talk about like shift work.
So that's where somebody like me could go back in time and walk onto that ICU ward and say, "You're killing the residents." Like if the residents continue to do this for the next 20 years, you're going to shorten their lives. And we know that. We know the dangers of shift work and that kind of stuff. But if you went around and talked to everybody and said, tell me about your sleep, we were all falling asleep on our feet. Nobody was sitting around the call room saying, oh, man, I could not sleep last night. Like that was not what was happening. It was we would sleep like we'd go in closets and try to sleep. I one time went into the bathroom and just sat on the toilet and put my head down on the toilet bowl thing. And it was like, I think I can fall asleep. I just get 5 minutes. When we get 5 minutes, we'll set my little pager to wake me up in 5 minutes and walk out. And nobody's asked questions. You've been in the bathroom for 5 minutes. Nobody wants to know about that. But I was in there to sleep. I'm in there to sleep, so it just, but it wasn't like, oh man, really struggling hours and hours to fall. No, that is not what was happening at that point, because that's not what sleep deprivation looks like. So I want people to understand what you can control is your schedule. You can set aside the time from 11 to 7 to sleep.
Yeah.
Once you've done that and you're disciplined about it, nobody touches it. I was always impressed with my middle child, my son, who's the swimmer, because it didn't matter what was going on in his life in high school. He went to bed at 10. He's like, okay, I'm going to bed, because he had to get up and swim, whatever. I'm like, right. Don't you have a big calculus test tomorrow? He's like, yeah. I'll figure it out. He was always, I'll figure it out. I don't know what that means. Like you go study in the water or something like that. But it didn't matter. It was like, I'll take the B-. I'm not going to choose staying up late over that. Versus my oldest is my daughter. I walked into a room one time at 2 a.m. and I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I got to make a poster. I'm like, for what? Driver's ed. And I looked at this poster and it was like this goddamn work of art. Like the turn signal. The assignment was, do the interior of a car, steering wheel, turn signals, cigarette light, I don't know what, the radio,
right.
Cruise control. And hers was like functional. Like when you push this little thing, the lights blinked. I'm like, sweetheart, my dad was a phys ed teacher, driver's ed teacher, football coach. I'm like, Bill Winter does not give a damn about this poster. Just draw a circle, write steering wheel, and go to bed. But again, there's that type A perfectionist, got to be she'll be like the president of something else, and she'll not get any sleep and be irritated and have all kinds of health problems because they never listened to her dad. But like, she got an A on the poster, because that's what you need in driver's ed, the A+. Because colleges look at that. Well, we're not really pleased with your A- in driver's ed here, so we're gonna kick you on down to the lesser colleges. So, what you say?
Hope you had a good safety.
That's right. Yeah, good. Exactly.
In driver's ed. Oh man. Well, Dr. Winter, Chris, this was a lot of fun, and I hope helpful. It's certainly helpful for me, and I sincerely mean that. So we talked a little bit about your book. For people who want to know more about you or follow you, where can I direct them?
Yeah, so the book, The Rested Child, Why You're Tired, Wired, Irritable Child May Have a Sleep Disorder and How to Help. That's my new book. They're available wherever books are sold. There is an audio version of it if you like the cool timbre of my voice. My first book is The Sleep Solution, Why Your Sleep's Broken, How to Fix It. Again, both on Amazon, Kindle, Audible. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, kind of TikTok, but not really. I don't feel like I'm too old for TikTok, but it's all Dr. Chris Winter, Dr. Chris Winter. So I try to put good stuff, particularly on my Twitter. Twitter, really try to put good studies and information on sleep, and Instagram, a little bit more fun with that. And follow me, DM me, tell me what you think about stuff. And if you have something positive to say my book, I'd love to hear that. Always makes my day. I feel like I can help somebody. But I really appreciate your platform, being able to get in here and talk about sleep and hopefully give somebody out there who's struggling and really in a dark place a little bit of hope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and this is, I'm sure, not news to you. I can't even tell you how many people I come across daily life, people who like shoot me a note through the show. I mean, sleep comes up all the time. I mean,
it's the best, isn't it? It was such dumb luck that I got into this field. I was like, sleep or spleen disorders. And thank God I went sleep instead of, because there's a lot of conversation about sleep and not so much about, there's some spleen expert out there. I always think about him at home and like, his podcast failed and, his graphic novels not selling very well, and he's just so bitter. Like, that damn Dr. Winters thinks he's so great with sleep. I went with spleen. So Time Magazine, Disorders of the Spleen at the checkout aisle.
Doctor of the Year.
That's right.
Times Doctor of the Year.
Right.
Well, thank you so much. We'll have to have you back on in the future if you're up for it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I would love to. It'd be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot.
You bet.